truly unusual breaking news. You know the breaking news animation. You know sometimes the news is big, significant, serious. This one is unusual. A major escalation in what is increasingly a kind of political, quiet, peaceful civil war, but a civil war of political proportions for MAGA over these Epstein files. And it's roiling the Trump administration at quite literally the highest levels. Sources detailing the ongoing clash over a fight that could cost someone their job. Trump's Attorney General Pam Bondi clashing with the FBI #2 official Dan Bongino. As everybody who follows these kind of stories knows, technically the AG oversees the FBI, but if you remember Comey or other strong-willed FBI officials, when you're at that #1, #2 level, they sometimes fight with the DOJ. Sources say Bongino is so upset about all this, he's saying maybe he'll just leave, which would be a very quick tenure, by the way, and he would be leaving in a sort of protest or criticism of Bondi's handling of the Epstein files. Other outside agitators, including Tucker Carlson, saying she's lost confidence, maybe she has to go. He was not at work today, reportedly. Sources also say Bondi and Bongino got into a heated clash Wednesday in a high-level meeting with him, her, FBI Director Patel, and Donald Trump's #1 person who tracks all this stuff and makes the big staffing decisions, Susie Wiles, the chief of staff, who, of course, also ran the Victoria's campaign. Axios has a report on this where Pam says her piece, Dan says his piece, didn't end on friendly terms. Bongino left angry. And you don't need to be a scholar of reporting or Watergate level intrigue to know somebody in this small meeting is leaking this stuff to Axios if it's true. A source close to Bongino saying he ain't coming back. Out of control furious is the other quote. This destroyed his career. He's threatening to quit and torch Pam unless she's fired, said someone who, again, according to that reporting, spoke with Bongino. By the way, hire podcasters and right-wing media figures to run major parts of the government, and you may find major parts of the government are being leaked on and run like another piece of podcast content. I'll come back to how some of this does swirl around MAGA content. Other parts of it, of course, are serious when you think about the victims in the original Epstein case. All of this, though, occurred because the DOJ has fallen short of the pledges that people around Trump, including Bondi, made. There were many questions about the Epstein case. From the moment of his in-custody death, this news program, for example, has reported on those questions. There are some suspicious details. This news program has not done what a lot of the internet and MAGA right-wing sort of circles have done, which is assert without evidence what maybe happened and then wait for the government to confirm it. Now we're seeing significant backlash from MAGA, probably some of the loudest against Trump since he took office. Journalists, other people following DOJ and Musk may be reporting one set of problems to the administration, but on the right, this is the big problem. All of this is because it was partly stoked by the very people who now say nothing to see here. They stoked this conspiracy which imploded on them.
The DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients? Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now.
In Epstein's case, it is incredibly disturbing. We have flight logs, we have information, names that will come out.
What names are in there, man? You understand how many powerful people probably want this thing to desperately go away?
The FBI airmailed into that operation and said, this is not getting out. Because they do that because this is another government gangster operation.
Seriously, we need to release the Epstein list. That is an important thing.
Release the list. That's the now vice president. The list's on my desk, the attorney general. The government gangsters, quote unquote, are in charge of all this stuff. The problem is they caught the car. All those people talking up that way now have the goods. They're in the government. They used to be pointing their finger. They found it pointing at themselves, like many an old internet meme, and it's blown up on them. So this matters politically because one or more people may be out of a job. It matters in a deeper sense because we're seeing the limits of governing by clickbait or political conspiracy theory. It also could matter if any of it got back to the real questions about the Epstein case, not whether Pam Bondi was lying when she said she had an Epstein list or is lying now when the memo says it doesn't exist, but can't be both. Now, in the FBI, there's a wider dysfunction involving some of these same people who we know from what they're saying have been spending many, many days, a lot of their energy on a client list they now say doesn't exist. But the Times is reporting that the FBI is taking the unusual step of using lie detectors for loyalty tests, subjecting personnel to questions as specific as to whether they've criticized or, quote, cast aspersions on Patel, who you just saw in that other clip talking about gangsters. This looks like something from a movie or another era, but according to the Times, it's happening. And in Trump's DOJ under Bondi, there's also a purge because there are officials who say they might be targeted not for how they're doing their job, but whether they're insufficiently, quote, politically loyal to Bondi and Trump. Fired without explanation, a culture of fear is how the Post describes it. And so one more point on all this tonight. What started as a very real question about a suspicious in-custody death, any journalist or lawyer could tell you the government's holding a high-profile detainee and they die under suspicious circumstances, you want to investigate that. What started with something real morphed into a MAGA conspiracy theory that was sold so hard by these leaders that it's blown up in their face. And more than almost anything Trump has done thus far in the second term, and you follow the news, you're familiar with it, this is the thing saddling Trump. This is the thing that has them leaking on each other, fighting with each other, talking about not coming back to work, all because the story they sold themselves blew up on themselves. I want to bring in our experts, Michelle Goldberg from the New York Times and MSNBC analyst, and Alencia Johnson, who worked on the Harris 24 campaign and wrote Flip the Tables, Everyday Disruptor's Guide to Finding Courage and Making Change. Plenty in there for the times we're in now. Welcome to both of you. Michelle, multiple things can be true. We're all for investigating and holding the government accountable. If there were problems in the original handling of Epstein, it stretches from the Trump folks who were in charge of the Bureau of Prisons at the time. If there was further cover-up or lack of transparency, that would include, of course, the ensuing Democratic administration, and now back to the Trump folks again. So there may be good questions to ask, and yet so many of the questions that have blown up in their face seem to be of their own making. In Bondi's case, saying things that she would know to be untrue.
Yes, certainly. I mean, I should say I don't really have very many priors about this. I'm inclined to believe that if there was evidence that Epstein was murdered, or if there was evidence of a so-called client list, given that we've had first Trump in charge, then Biden, now Trump again, there would be somebody who had the incentive to leak it or to put that out there. You know, that said, there are, as you said earlier, there are a lot of weird things about this case, including now the changed metadata on the tape that they put out. But I think the key is two things. One, that Pam Bondi has made these statements that can't be reconciled. Either she was lying outright and kind of getting the MAGA people's hopes up when she said, I have this list on my desk, you know, or she's lying now when she says no such lists exist and there's nothing there. And I think that part of it is that there's a difference between someone like Pam Bondi, who could have been a Republican official in a lot of different administrations, and someone like Dan Bongino, who is purely a creature of the MAGA world, would never be in the FBI under any other president, and then sort of has no political or entertainment future if he is seen by the MAGA base as a traitor. You know, Pam Bondi is more of a sort of Bill Barr figure, and so they might all despise her. But if they feel really betrayed by Dan Bongino, who I think probably was a true believer that he was going to come in there and they were going to have this cathartic exposure of all their enemies, you know, if he's now seen as being part of a cover-up, I think that's much more of a threat to him personally.
Yeah. I appreciate that breakdown. That makes a lot of sense. Alencia, I want to play the MAGA meltdown over this. For folks who aren't constantly watching The War Room or Tucker, you maybe only have heard some of it. But again, I don't think it's an overstatement that they're more upset about this than most anything that's happened in these first 170 days. Take a look.
Don't tell us all this stuff's coming out and the investigation's massive and that Trump wants it released and then say, oh, there's nothing there.
This stinks. This just reeks.
Pam Bondi needs to be fired. Who is rolling this out? The little rascals?
So I'm going to go throw up, actually.
That is so crazy. This is honestly one of the craziest things I've ever seen in my entire life.
This seems like unforgivable behavior.
For them to do something like this tears my guts out.
Alencia.
It's giving Real Housewives of D.C. and a really nasty reunion. But, you know, it's interesting. Your lead into that was the point that I've been thinking about. There have been so many egregious things that have happened in this administration from, you know, we see unemployment having gone up under this administration. We see this horrible bill that happened last week. We see what is happening with these ICE raids, all of these things that have happened in this first 170 days. And this is the thing that the base is literally crying over on television and on video. And so it will be interesting to see how, moving forward, the administration actually starts to bring in some of these MAGA loyalists who, quite frankly, are these conspiracy theorists that they would campaign with, right, in 2024. They brought them into the administration, and now they are infighting, and it's leaking out publicly. Is that continuing to erode the trust that the MAGA base has with the Trump administration? And I think it will. It will. Now, I actually don't have a lot of empathy for a lot of MAGA supporters because we've been here before in his first administration, right? He'll make one promise and then go the complete opposite direction. He continues to spew conspiracy theories, or people in his cabinet do, but yet that's actually not enough for people to pump the brakes. And the people who can pump the brakes are actually the people.
Let me jump in. But on the politics, you ran with Harris, 1.5 race, right? Had it started earlier or different things happened, 1.5 in politics, that's not a Reagan landslide, right? Things can shift. Bannon says, whatever you think of him on the politics, that if they continue to mess this up, they're going to lose 10% of their base, which in a general election, quick math, would be a 5-point swing, which is pretty striking about how big they think the issue is. Take a look.
For this to go away, you're going to lose 10% of the MAGA movement. If we lose 10% of the MAGA movement right now, we're going to lose 40 seats in 26. We're going to lose the president.